The rain fell in heavy sheets as if the skies themselves were mourning the fate of 17-year-old Emily Carter. She sat hunched on a rusted metal bench at the edge of the city park, her hoodie soaked through and her arms wrapped protectively around a crying infant. The baby, Liam, was just 4 months old and he wailed in discomfort, his tiny body shivering from the cold. Emily whispered softly, trying to soothe him, though her own voice trembled with fear. The park lights flickered as a gust of wind swept through the trees. Emily had nowhere to go. Her mother had thrown her out after one too many fights about irresponsibility, and the father of her child had vanished long before Liam's first kick in the womb. She'd spent the last 2 nights in a 24-hour laundromat and the night before that in the corner booth of a diner, pretending to wait for someone. But tonight, there was no place to hide. No food left. No diapers. No hope. She had walked the streets all day looking for anything, an open shelter, a helping hand, even a warm doorway. Every glance from a stranger felt like judgment. Every closed door reinforced what she'd begun to believe about herself, that she was a failure. As Liam's cries grew louder, Emily began to cry too. Her tears mixed with the rain and her sobs grew ragged. "I'm sorry, baby," she whispered. "I don't know what to do anymore." Just then, from the shadows near the path, a voice emerged, soft but firm. "You'll catch your death sitting out here like that, child." Emily flinched and pulled Liam closer to her chest. An elderly woman wrapped in a thick wool coat and holding a floral umbrella stepped into the glow of the nearest lamppost. Her silver hair peeked out beneath a knitted hat, and she looked like someone out of a different era. Her face was lined with years, but her eyes sparkled with clarity and something else, kindness. "I didn't mean to scare you," the woman said, stopping a respectful distance away. "I was just out walking my dog. He doesn't like the rain, so he cut the walk short." But then I heard crying. 2 voices. Emily didn't answer. She didn't trust anyone, not anymore. But Liam's cries were growing frantic, and the warmth radiating from the woman's presence was almost magnetic. "Your baby's cold," the woman continued gently. "And hungry, I imagine." Emily sniffled, eyes darting around. "We're fine," she lied, though her soaked clothes and pale lips betrayed the truth. The woman nodded. "Of course you are," she said softly, not pushing. "But my house is just around the corner. Not too far. I've got a kettle on and some blankets in the dryer. And maybe a little formula. I used to keep some around just in case." Emily hesitated. Everything inside her screamed to keep moving, to run from any offer that seemed too good. But then Liam let out another piercing cry, and her heart broke a little more. She looked into the woman's eyes and saw no judgment, just genuine concern. "What's your name?" the woman asked. "Emily," she whispered. "Well, Emily," the woman said, "I'm Margaret, and I think tonight we were meant to meet." Margaret's house sat quietly on the corner of Willow Street. A modest, 2-story home with ivy creeping up the sides and a wraparound porch that held a faded rocking chair. Emily followed behind the elderly woman slowly, unsure of what to expect. The storm still raged overhead, but inside Margaret's home, it was a different world. As the door opened, warmth spilled out like a hug. A golden glow from antique lamps lit the foyer, and the soft scent of cinnamon and lavender welcomed them. Emily stepped inside cautiously, clutching Liam tightly. Margaret carefully placed her umbrella in a stand and turned to her with a smile. "Come in, take off your shoes. Let me get you a towel." Emily didn't respond, but her soaked sneakers squeaked as she stepped onto the wooden floor. Liam's cries had quieted some, soothed by the change in atmosphere. Margaret disappeared down the hallway and returned with 2 large towels. One for Emily, one for the baby. "There's a fire going in the living room. Let's get you both dry first, then we'll see about some supper." Emily followed her in silence. The living room was something out of a storybook. Plush furniture, a worn bookshelf brimming with novels and knickknacks, and a large stone fireplace where a fire crackled merrily. Margaret motioned toward the couch. "You sit. I'll handle the rest." Emily carefully unzipped Liam's damp onesie and wrapped him in the towel. Margaret reappeared with a small bottle of baby formula, sealed and fresh. Emily hesitated, then took it with shaking hands. "You keep formula around?" she asked quietly. Margaret settled into a nearby chair. "Old habit. I worked as a nurse for 40 years, maternity ward mostly. You get used to being prepared." Emily fed Liam, her hands slowly steadying as he drank. The quiet gurgle of his feeding filled the room like music. Margaret watched with a gentle expression, not prying, not interrogating, just being there. You said you were a nurse? For a long time. Retired 10 years ago. But I still volunteer at the church's shelter downtown. Sometimes we get young mothers like you. It's not easy, I know. Emily looked up, her eyes wide. You don't even know me. I don't need to, Margaret said simply. I can see you're tired, scared, and doing your best. That's enough for now. The silence stretched between them, comfortable this time. The fire crackled. Liam let out a soft sigh, drifting to sleep in his mother's arms. Emily leaned back into the couch and felt something unfamiliar. Peace. I didn't think anyone cared anymore, she said, barely above a whisper. Margaret looked over at her and smiled gently. There's always someone who cares. You just have to hold on long enough to find them. Emily woke up with a start, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling above her. For a moment, she feared she'd fallen asleep on a park bench again until the soft warmth of a blanket and the gentle crackling of a dying fire reminded her where she was. Liam lay nestled against her chest, breathing peacefully. His tiny hand clutched her hoodie, and his round face was calm in a way she hadn't seen in days. Across the room, Margaret was curled in her armchair, knitting in the morning light. She looked up with a warm smile as Emily stirred. Good morning, sweetheart. You both slept like angels, she said, placing her knitting needles aside. Emily blinked and sat up slowly. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to fall asleep on your couch. Margaret chuckled. Oh, honey, you needed it. That baby needed it too. No harm done. There was something about Margaret's voice that melted away the usual panic Emily woke up with. For the first time in weeks, her muscles weren't clenched with stress the moment her eyes opened. Margaret rose and bustled off toward the kitchen. You like oatmeal? I've got some with cinnamon and raisins. Emily hesitated. You've done enough already. I can't. Nonsense. A good breakfast never hurt anyone. Besides, I have enough oatmeal to feed an army, Margaret called out. Emily smiled despite herself. As she adjusted Liam in her arms, her eyes scanned the room. It felt like a home, not just a house. Pictures lined the fireplace mantel, children, grandkids maybe, and a photo of Margaret and an older man who looked like he hadn't smiled much until he stood next to her. Is that your husband? Emily asked when Margaret returned with a tray of steaming bowls. Margaret's eyes twinkled. Was. Harold passed 8 years ago. Vietnam vet. He was quiet but kind. You'd have liked him. I'm sorry. Margaret nodded gently, placing the tray on a small table. It's okay. I had a good run with him. That's more than most can say these days. They sat and ate in silence for a few minutes. The oatmeal was warm and sweet, comforting in a way Emily didn't know food could be. Liam stirred, then let out a soft coo. Margaret leaned over to peek at him. He's beautiful, she said softly. Looks just like you. Emily smiled and brushed her son's cheek with her finger. He's all I've got. Margaret studied her carefully. So, what happened, if you don't mind my asking? Emily stared into her bowl for a long moment. My mom kicked me out when she found out I was pregnant. Said I was ruining my life. I tried to stay with friends, but that didn't last. I've been bouncing around shelters, streets, wherever. I keep thinking if I can just get a job, just get a break. Her voice cracked. Margaret reached across the table and placed her hand over Emily's. You don't have to do this alone. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. She looked down at her lap, embarrassed. I don't want charity. This isn't charity, Margaret replied. It's love. It's what we're supposed to do, help one another. When Harold passed, I thought I had no one left to give that to. But maybe I was wrong. Emily bit her lip, unsure of what to say. The silence said enough. Margaret gave her hand a gentle squeeze. Let's take things one day at a time. You're safe here for as long as you need to be. In the days that followed, Emily began to settle into a rhythm that almost felt normal. Mornings started with oatmeal or scrambled eggs. Margaret always had the kettle going, and she'd hum old gospel songs as she moved about the kitchen. Liam slept better in the quiet of the house, and Emily began to sleep deeper herself, though it took her a while to stop waking up in a panic. One morning, while folding laundry, Margaret brought up the subject Emily had been avoiding. So, Margaret said casually, handing her a baby sock, what would you think about finishing school? Emily looked up, surprised. I dropped out. I mean, it just didn't make sense anymore after I got pregnant. I was already so far behind. Margaret nodded, never missing a beat as she folded a towel. Well, they've got online programs now. Flexible schedules. And I know a few folks at the community center who help young moms like you get back on track. Emily shifted uncomfortably. I don't know. I'm not even sure I'd be good at it anymore. Margaret's tone was gentle but firm. Don't sell yourself short, sweetheart. You're smarter than you give yourself credit for. Emily wanted to believe that. She did. But years of being told otherwise had worn down her confidence like water over stone. Later that afternoon, Emily stepped outside for the first time in days. Margaret had offered her a warm coat, her late daughter's, Emily suspected, though the woman never said. The sky was crisp, the air filled with the scent of turning leaves. Autumn had swept into the small town like a whisper, and Emily stood quietly on the porch, letting the moment settle in her chest. That's when she saw a young woman across the street wrangling 2 toddlers while juggling a grocery bag. One of the little boys dropped his sippy cup and the woman sighed heavily before chasing after him. Emily watched, her arms instinctively tightening around Liam. She could see the exhaustion in that mother's eyes, the weight of responsibility written into her posture. But instead of turning away, Emily stepped off the porch. "Need a hand?" she asked. The woman looked up, startled, then smiled gratefully. "If you don't mind." Emily bent to grab the runaway sippy cup and helped carry the bag to the woman's porch. They exchanged names, Janelle, she said, and chatted for a moment before parting ways. Back inside, Margaret smiled knowingly as Emily walked in. "Feels good to help someone, doesn't it?" she asked. Emily paused, then nodded. "Yeah, it does." Margaret set down her knitting and looked at her thoughtfully. "I think there's something beautiful in what you're becoming, Emily. Not just surviving, but growing. You've still got mountains ahead, sure. But you've already climbed some big ones." That night, after Liam fell asleep in the bassinet Margaret had found in her attic, Emily sat quietly by the fireplace, sipping tea and staring into the flames. For the first time in a long time, she began to picture a future that didn't terrify her. And that felt like hope. The following week, Emily found herself sitting in a small office at the local community center, nervously bouncing Liam on her knee. The woman across from her, Ms. Dana, a no-nonsense administrator with horn-rimmed glasses and a heart of gold, was tapping away at a computer. "All right," Ms. Dana said, glancing over her frames, "I've got you scheduled for the GED prep classes. Monday through Thursday, 10 to noon. You'll be in a small group, other young moms mostly." Emily blinked. "That's soon." "We like to strike while the iron's hot," Ms. Dana said with a smile. "You've got childcare covered, right?" Emily glanced at Liam, then hesitated. "Not really. Margaret already called me this morning," Ms. Dana said with a wink. "She volunteered to babysit." Emily exhaled a mix of relief and disbelief. Of course she did. Outside the office, Margaret was in the waiting area, knitting a scarf and chatting with a receptionist. She looked up as Emily exited and smiled like she had just won a bet. "You knew I'd sign up," Emily said, mock scolding her. Margaret just grinned. Didn't doubt it for a second. They walked out together, the fall wind tugging at their coats. Emily adjusted the carrier sling around her shoulder and glanced at Margaret. "You're doing so much for me. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Margaret paused mid-step. "Emily," she said gently, "you're already repaying me." "How?" "By letting me be part of your life. By letting me help. That matters more than you know." Emily's eyes stung. She looked away toward the trees lining the sidewalk. "People haven't exactly stuck around for me." "Well," Margaret replied, "then it's high time someone did." Back at the house, Emily began helping around more. She took to cleaning the kitchen after meals and organizing the cluttered attic that had become a time capsule of Margaret's past. One dusty afternoon, while sorting through a box of Harold's military items, she stumbled upon an old journal. Margaret saw her holding it and nodded with a fond smile. He kept notes. Memories. Things he was too quiet to say out loud. "May I?" Emily asked. "Of course." That night, after Liam had gone down, Emily read the first few pages. Inside were sketches, observations, musings about the war, about home, about Margaret. One entry read, "I don't know if I've ever deserved a woman like Margaret. She sees the good in people even when the world turns its back. She has a kind of quiet strength. Like the moon, gentle but constant." Emily wiped a tear and closed the journal, holding it to her chest. She wondered if anyone would ever write something like that about her. If maybe one day she could be someone like Margaret, a beacon for someone else. By the end of the month, Emily was thriving. She was attending class, helping Margaret with meals, and reading to Liam every night. She even helped organize a diaper drive at the community center after learning about how many other young moms in the area were struggling. But perhaps the most important change wasn't in what Emily was doing, it was in how she was seeing herself. No longer as a mistake, or a burden, or a failure, but as a mother, a fighter, a survivor, and now someone with purpose. Winter crept in slowly, frosting the edges of the windows and blanketing the town in quiet. But inside Margaret's home, things were warm in temperature and in spirit. Emily was now 3 weeks into her GED classes. Her mornings were filled with textbooks and tutoring, her afternoons with feeding, burping, and playing with Liam, and her evenings spent by the fire with Margaret. Every day, she learned something new both in class and in life. One snowy Tuesday, as she stepped off the bus from the community center, Emily spotted a familiar figure waiting on the porch. Margaret, bundled in a thick shawl, Liam nestled against her chest in a baby wrap. He was gurgling happily, and Margaret was singing to him, softly swaying side to side. "He doesn't nap for me like that," Emily said as she stepped up the porch. Margaret smiled, rocking gently. "I've got a grandmother's touch, what can I say?" Emily laughed. "You'd make a great grandma." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she immediately tensed, worried she'd overstepped. But Margaret didn't flinch. She turned toward Emily, her smile softening. "I've always wanted more grandchildren," she said, looking down at Liam. "Seems like I got one more after all." Emily blinked, her throat tightening. "You mean that?" "Of course I do. And you're like a daughter to me now, Emily. You've brought life into this old house again." The emotion in Margaret's voice was real, and it settled deep in Emily's heart. It wasn't just about safety or kindness anymore. It was love. Family, the way it was meant to be, not because of blood, but because of choice. That evening, as snow gently dusted the world outside, Emily stood in the hallway holding Liam and stared at the photographs on the wall. There were so many faces, smiling children, young parents, old friends. Margaret came up beside her and handed her a small frame. "This one's empty," she said. "I was saving it for the right picture." Inside the frame was a handwritten note, "For the ones we choose to love." Emily smiled, blinking back tears. "I think I have the perfect photo for this." The next weekend, Margaret helped Emily set up a small photo shoot in the park. Just a disposable camera, a snowy bench, and the two of them wrapped in scarves with Liam between them. The resulting photo wasn't fancy, no filters or professional lighting, but it was beautiful in its honesty. A girl, a baby, an elderly woman, family. Not everything was perfect. There were still moments of doubt. Days when Emily's anxiety returned, clawing at her confidence. Days when Liam refused to nap or teethed through the night, leaving them both sleepless and cranky. Days when Margaret's arthritis flared up and she had to rest more. But the difference now was simple. Emily didn't have to face it alone. She wasn't the same girl crying in the rain anymore. She was a mother, a student, a daughter in heart, and perhaps one day, something even more, because her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. It was a Friday afternoon when the past came crashing back into Emily's new world. Margaret had gone out to pick up some fresh produce from the market, and Emily was at home with Liam, now 6 months old and learning how to sit up on his own. They were on the living room rug, Emily stacking soft blocks, Liam babbling joyfully. Then came the knock. Firm. Familiar. Too familiar. Emily froze. Her heart skipped and then galloped. She scooped Liam into her arms and peered through the peephole. It was her mother, the same woman who had slammed a bedroom door behind her, yelling, "You've ruined your life, and I'm not going to let you ruin mine." The same woman who hadn't called or texted or asked once if Emily was alive. And now, there she was, wearing a heavy coat, eyes shadowed, lips tight. Emily opened the door a crack. "What are you doing here?" Her mother's eyes flicked down to the baby, then quickly away. "I heard you were staying here." "Margaret. She used to go to the same church as us." Emily's jaw clenched. "So, I just wanted to see you." "See him?" Her mother shifted, uncomfortable. "You could have called. I didn't know where you were." "I tried," Emily replied, her voice firm. "You blocked me. I called 6 times before I gave up." A silence stretched between them. Liam let out a soft hiccup and leaned his head against Emily's chest. "I made a mistake," her mother said suddenly, her voice cracking. "I was angry, scared. I didn't know what to do when you said you were keeping the baby. It felt like you were throwing your future away." "I wasn't," Emily whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "I was building a new one." Another pause. "I want to fix this," her mother said. "If you'll let me." Emily stood there, torn between pain and the aching hope of a daughter who still longed to be loved. "I don't know if I'm ready to let you in," Emily said quietly. "But I'm not shutting the door forever. Not anymore." Her mother nodded slowly. "That's fair. Just then, Margaret's car pulled into the driveway. She stepped out, grocery bags in hand, and looked between the two women. "Everything all right?" she asked gently. Emily turned, her face still taut but calm. "Yeah. Just dealing with some history." Margaret nodded and walked inside, giving them space but not disappearing. Emily stepped back toward the doorway. "You can call me if you want. I'm not promising anything, but maybe we start there." Her mother gave a small nod, tears glinting in her eyes. "I'd like that." That night, after Liam had fallen asleep and the snow had begun to fall again outside, Emily sat with Margaret by the fire. "Was it hard?" she asked suddenly. "Forgiving someone who hurt you?" Margaret looked into the flames for a moment. "Yes. But healing is even harder when you carry bitterness. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about freeing yourself." Emily nodded slowly, her heart heavier but lighter too, like she'd unpacked something long overdue. And for the first time, she realized she had the strength to keep going, not in spite of the pain, but because of it. Emily's world didn't change overnight after that encounter with her mother, but something inside her had shifted. She started journaling again. Little entries each night, some only a sentence or two. "Liam laughed so hard today he snorted," or "Margaret's cinnamon muffins should be illegal," or even "I didn't cry once today." That felt big. The GED classes were nearing their end and Emily had already scheduled her test for the coming month. She studied in the mornings while Liam napped and spent her evenings going over flashcards Margaret quizzed her on from her recliner. One chilly evening in December, Margaret handed her a manila envelope over dinner. "What's this?" Emily asked. Margaret smiled coyly. "Open it." Inside was a crisp, typed-up document. A reference letter. 3 pages long. Margaret had written it on her old typewriter, the keys clearly worn with years of use. "I heard from Ms. Dana that you were interested in applying for that daycare internship," Margaret said, sipping her tea. "You'll need letters of recommendation." Emily scanned the page. She couldn't believe what she was reading. Emily Jones has shown remarkable growth, compassion, and commitment in the face of life's hardest trials. She is not only a devoted mother but also a determined young woman with the heart of a nurturer and the mind of a leader. Tears welled in her eyes before she even reached the second paragraph. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Just say you'll go for it," Margaret replied, her eyes gleaming with pride. "You'd be amazing with those kids." The application process was intimidating, but Emily did it, every form, every essay, every required document. For the first time, she wasn't applying from a place of desperation, but hope. A week later, the call came. She got the internship. It was part-time, paid just enough to start saving, and best of all, Liam could come with her. The center had a Moms in Training program allowing young mothers to work and learn while their children stayed nearby. It was perfect. When she told Margaret the news, the older woman didn't cheer or shout. She just stood up, walked over, and wrapped Emily in the biggest, tightest, most meaningful hug she had ever received in her life. "I knew you would," she whispered. Christmas was simple that year. Margaret gave Emily a second-hand leather satchel for her internship with a note tucked inside that read, "Every great teacher carries more than books. You carry love." Emily gave Margaret a framed photo of the 3 of them, her, Liam, and Margaret, taken in front of the house during the first snowfall. Below it, she'd hand-lettered the words, "Home is who you share it with." They spent the night watching old movies, eating fudge, and rocking Liam to sleep in shifts. And as Emily stood in the kitchen, sipping cocoa and watching Margaret hum softly to the baby in the next room, she felt something she hadn't in a very long time. Peace. The future still held unknowns. But for once, that didn't scare her. She had love, she had purpose, and she had family. The start of the new year brought with it a brisk energy. Emily began her internship at the daycare center during the first week of January, bundled in her satchel and nerves. On her first day, she stood just outside the door, peering through the frosted glass, wondering if she was ready. Then she felt a soft squeeze on her shoulder, Margaret, who'd driven her there despite her aching knees. "You've already come this far," she said. "Just take one more step." Emily smiled and did exactly that. The daycare was warm, full of crayon-colored posters and the sound of tiny feet pattering against tile floors. The head teacher, a woman named Miss Carla, was patient and bubbly and welcomed Emily with a warm hug and a clipboard. "You're gonna be just fine," she said, gesturing toward a room of toddlers stacking blocks. "You already speak the language of chaos." By the end of the day, Emily was exhausted but exhilarated. She changed diapers, supervised snack time, helped a little girl find her missing shoe, and even calmed down a child mid-tantrum by humming one of Margaret's gospel tunes. And as she looked over at Liam, fast asleep in the baby room nearby, she smiled. "This is where I'm supposed to be." In the following weeks, Emily grew bolder. She suggested new reading activities, helped plan a Mommy and Me weekend event, and even took charge during an emergency fire drill. Miss Carla took notice. "You've got a gift," she told Emily one day. "These kids listen to you, respect you. You don't just supervise, you connect." It was the first time Emily had heard words like that spoken about her. Not burden or distraction or troublemaker, but leader, gifted, valued. At home, things were just as steady. Margaret's health had its ups and downs, but Emily was now confident enough to take the wheel more often. She cooked meals, did the grocery runs, and even helped Margaret digitize her recipe collection for a little blog they joked about starting. Margaret and Me, Meals That Raised Us. Late one night, while cleaning out the attic, Emily found a dusty box tucked behind old furniture. Inside were drawings, childlike and colorful, Margaret's daughter's early artwork. She brought it downstairs, unsure how Margaret would react. Instead of tears, Margaret smiled as she sifted through them. She used to say she was going to be an artist, then a dancer, then a zookeeper. Did she ever decide? Emily asked. She decided to love people, Margaret said. That's what mattered most. Emily placed her hand over Margaret's. She sounds a lot like you. Margaret squeezed her hand in return. And a lot like you. One morning, as winter slowly started to melt into spring, Emily sat on the front porch with Liam on her lap, sipping coffee as birds chirped in the trees. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother. "Mom, thinking of you. Would love to see you both sometime this week, if that's okay." Emily stared at the screen for a long moment. Then she typed back. "Emily, maybe Saturday. At the park. 2 p.m. Her fingers hovered over the send button, then she tapped it. Margaret, standing in the doorway with a blanket for Liam, saw her face and said gently, "You're opening doors now." Emily nodded. "I think I'm finally ready." The breeze danced through the trees at Willowbrook Park, gentle and warm, signaling the end of winter and the birth of spring. Emily sat on a weathered bench beneath a budding oak tree. Liam balanced on her lap, chewing on a soft teething ring. She glanced at her phone. 1:57 p.m. A few minutes later, a hesitant figure approached from the other side of the walking path, Emily's mother. She wore a soft blue sweater and jeans, her hair shorter than Emily remembered. She held something small and gift-wrapped in her hand. They made eye contact. Emily gave a quiet nod. Her mother sat down slowly on the other end of the bench, just far enough to show she respected the space between them, yet close enough that Emily didn't feel abandoned. Liam let out a coo, reaching for the bright pink ribbon on the package. Her mother smiled. "He's so big," she said softly. 6 months next week, Emily replied. "He loves music, carrots, and pulling my hair." Her mother chuckled. "You had the same obsession when you were his age." They sat in silence for a while. It wasn't awkward, just cautious. Gentle. Like they were both stepping onto a frozen lake, 1 inch at a time. Then Emily's mother held out the gift. "I know I can't undo everything. I can't pretend I didn't fail you when you needed me most. But I'd like to start learning how to be here. In whatever way you'll let me." Emily hesitated, then took the box. Inside was a tiny locket. Silver. Simple. Engraved with the initials E and L. "For you and Liam," her mom said. "I didn't know what to bring. I thought maybe that could be a start." Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. "I'm not ready for everything," she said quietly. "But I'm open to something." Her mother nodded. "That's more than I deserve." "No," Emily said, shaking her head. "It's not about deserving. It's about choosing." The weeks that followed were filled with slow steps forward. Emily allowed her mother to visit the house, Margaret's house, once a week. They shared awkward dinners, exchanged small talk, and built new habits with the unspoken understanding that they couldn't change the past, but they could shape what came next. Margaret remained the anchor through it all, always steady, always wise. One evening, as Emily sat beside her on the back porch watching the stars, she said, "You changed everything." "No," Margaret replied with a smile. "You did. I just left the porch light on." Emily looked over at her. "Why did you?" "I was a stranger." Margaret reached out, placing her hand over Emily's. "Because someone once did the same for me. When I was young and lost and alone, someone said, 'Come in. You're not a burden. You're a beginning.'" Emily's eyes filled again. Not with sadness this time, but awe. It all made sense now. The legacy. The choice. 3 months later, Emily passed her GED with flying colors. She applied to a part-time certification program in early childhood education. The daycare center offered her a long-term position, and Miss Carla hinted that one day, Emily might even be ready to lead her own classroom. Liam said his first word, "Ma." They couldn't tell if it meant Mom or Margaret. They decided it meant both. And on a golden afternoon in June, as birds chirped and sun spilled through the windows, Margaret fell asleep in her chair with Liam curled in her arms, and never woke up. Her passing was peaceful, quiet, like the last page of a book read one too many times, loved until the very end. Emily grieved. She mourned. She sat on the porch swing for days afterward, clutching a photo of the three of them, trying to understand how life could give so much and then take it away. But then, she remembered what Margaret said, "You're not a burden. You're a beginning." So Emily chose to live like that mattered. Emily stood in a room full of toddlers, now officially a certified assistant teacher. On her desk was the locket, a framed photo of Margaret and Liam, and a sign above the blackboard that read, "Every child is a story yet to be written." Her students called her Miss Emily. She smiled every time she heard it. Her mother came every Sunday to watch Liam while Emily prepped her lesson plans. They weren't perfect, but they were healing. And in her heart, Emily knew that no matter what storms had hit her, no matter how far she'd fallen, she had risen. She had become the woman she never thought she could be. All because an elderly woman saw a broken girl on a rainy street and chose to love her anyway.